Sandy?
Would Ann's coach, Frank Garner, please get up here? He's laughing already. I don't know why people do that. Frank Garner, ladies and gentlemen, developed his blue nose rather late in life. Because he was born in St. Catharines, Ontario on August 8, 1944, he was too young to realize he was born in the wrong province. When he was 18, he was named Athlete of the Year by the town of Mississauga. The year was 1962. The same year, he was the 500-meter C2 bronze medalist in the Junior World Canoeing Championships in Essen, West Germany. It wasn't his only success. In fact, between 61 and 68, he won 20 national and 30 provincial canoeing medals. It was football which brought Garner to Nova Scotia, where he played for St. Mary's from 1964 to 67. He also played a bit of volleyball. In his senior year, the Husky football team elected him co-captain. Some other football experts must have agreed with their selection because upon graduation, the Montreal Alouettes drafted him. But it's not his athletic prowess which brings him to this hallowed hall tonight, since he's being inducted in the builder category. A category reserved for those who put in unbelievable time and effort on behalf of others. In this instant, build is the right descriptor. Early on, Garner coached junior and senior high school track and field, hockey, soccer, and volleyball teams. Twice his volleyball teams advanced to the provincial semifinals. Actually, he came to Nova Scotia with previous coaching experience. During his long competitive career in Mississauga, he'd spent many hours coaching younger paddlers. Frank got a teaching job after graduation, and in the summer, he undertook the coaching job at a new canoe club in Waverly called Chima. The club, as you may already have heard, that Ann Dodge helped build. The club drew from Waverly, a small community at the time, about 2,000 people. He was to be the coach of Chima from 69 to 79. Through his leadership and the hard volunteer work of dedicated members, Chima moved from a garage full of dreaming kids to become an internationally known powerhouse in the world of paddling. Chima's first national success came in 1973 when they won the senior war canoe at the Nationals. Despite the purists who'd like to believe otherwise, a war canoe race always the most exciting one at a paddling regatta. A war canoe is always the most exciting because 14 paddlers face front and move the canoe, while a coach usually stands in the back directing matters and steering. Frank, realizing that his crew had a shot at the Canadian record, kept hollering, "They're coming! They're coming!" One wonders if they'll ever believe them again, because they won by 30 lengths. They won in 3:33.3, a time that the head judge found so unbelievable that he ruled it out as a Canadian record, despite the fact that the watches of the two-timers were in complete agreement. Someone put that old trophy into his car at his wedding. Is there anyone here from Chima tonight? You talk about building from the grassroots up. Garner spent half his coaching time seeing that the mother's war canoe was always in top form. This is a canoe race where you literally have to be a mother. You're now eligible, Ann. They became so keen they went undefeated. Canada game medalist Monica Schaefer's first recollection of Chima was sitting between Frank's knees in the mother's war canoe while he acted as coach and coxswain. Frank is still needled about the slip he made when world champion Don Bryan's wife Robbie first came out to the war canoe. Frank wanted to know which way she preferred to paddle. He claims he meant to ask, "What side are you?" But what came out was, "What size are you?" Nowadays, you might end up in court for a slip like that. But at Chima, it's still a line used whenever one of the members wants to bring a little color to Frank's cheeks. The Chima family became almost as important in some households as the smaller unit that sat around their dinner table. It certainly replaced the family Frank had left back in Mississauga. When Frank and Paula got married, they didn't bother sending out invitations. They just put out a notice on the club bulletin board indicating everyone was invited. No one was the least bit surprised, least of all Frank and Paula, when everybody showed up. During the last 5 years of Coach Garner's tenure at the club, 1975 to 1979, Chima was among the top 3 paddling clubs in Canada. In 75, they surprised everyone except themselves when they came 3rd in the Canadian Championships. They themselves weren't surprised because Frank had been telling them they were the best in the world every time they put their paddles in the water. They were 3rd again in 78, 76 and 79 they came 2nd, and in August 1977 in Dartmouth, Chima brought the province to their feet when they won the Canadian Burgee, the trophy given to the #1 club at the national championships. Garner told the kids that his dream was to one day sleep with the Burgee. They won it. He slept with it. Until Paula told him it was it or her. They won the first Burgee ever by a maritime club by virtue of winning 8 first-place medals, 7 second-place medals, 3 third-place medals. They won the junior men's title, the junior ladies' title, the juvenile men's, and the senior men's. 1977 was an unbelievable year for Chima. They placed 10 athletes and 2 coaches on Canada's national team at the North American Championships. Chima athletes actually had a part in 11 gold medals. At the Canadian Junior Olympics held in Dartmouth that year, the club won Midget C1, Midget C2, and they won 6 races at the prestigious Dominion Day Regatta in Toronto. 5 Chima athletes represented the province in the 77 Summer Games in Newfoundland, winning 4 gold and 5 silver medals. Dave McNaughton and Randy McDonald placed 9th in the Junior World Championships in Vichy, France. They were the first Canadians ever to reach the finals in junior men's canoe. 6 club members became nationally carded in addition to Ann Dodge. 2 years later, Dave McNaughton and Rick Spriggs at the Junior Worlds took 8th place in the C2 1000. It was during this trip that Frank, certainly not generally known as a prankster, set up McNaughton. Frank had a great Russian friend with whom he planned the sting. When Nikolai Smirnov, and that's really the guy's name, Nikolai Smirnov, was introduced to the Canadian team, he pretended to understand no English. The fun resulted in the fact that everybody but Dave knew that the guy was an English teacher at home. David, being a bit of a smart aleck and never one to pass up an opportunity for fun at someone else's expense, spent all night smiling at the guy while telling him how stupid he and everything Russian was. Smirnov, in response, kept smiling and grunting and nodding. Because everyone was in on it, the more Dave made his smart-ass remarks, the more everybody laughed. Dave, of course, assumed they were laughing because he was so witty. Near the end of the night, Smirnov turned to Dave and he said, "Excuse me, would you pass one of those freshly delivered beers? I haven't been able to get to mine, what with listening to your prattle all night." In all, members of that Chima team won well over 200 national titles. They've represented Nova Scotia on Summer Games teams. They've represented Canada in the North Americans, both the Junior and Senior Worlds, and in the last 3 Olympic Games. For all of this, and perhaps for a lot of other reasons too, Chima held a Frank Garner Appreciation Night in 1985. In 73, he was named head coach of the Nova Scotia Summer Games team, which went to compete in Burnaby, BC. Garner's national success was rewarded when he was named the head coach of the Canadian junior team in 1975, leading them over the next 5 years to the World Championships in Italy, England, Bulgaria, France, and Finland. He was assistant coach of the 76 Olympic team, which competed in Montreal. All of this would have earned his induction here tonight, but his crowning achievement was yet to come. Frank Garner, ladies and gentlemen, reached the pinnacle of amateur coaching in this country when he was named the head coach for both the 1980 Moscow Olympics, in which Canada stupidly did not compete, and the 84 Games, in which they competed like no other Canadian team before or since. The 1984 Olympics were a triumph for the Canadian paddling team and a personal triumph for Coach Garner, as their total of 6 medals came second in those unofficial Olympic standings. Canadian paddling team in 1984 had 2 bronze, 2 silver, and 2 gold medals. Frank truly built that Olympic team. The disappointment of not competing in 1980 had to be overcome, and athletes had to be juiced up to push them into preparing for another grueling 4 years. Lesser mortals would have sat back and rested after the coaching career Frank had, at least a little while on their well-earned laurels. Why don't I let you judge whether Frank Garner has done that since he left coaching? Since then, he's been a member of the Canadian Olympic Association, Olympic and International High Performance Committee, Expert Advisory Committee for the Canadian Centre for Drug-Free Sport, Task Force on Coaching in Nova Scotia, Dartmouth Bid Committee for the 1997 Senior World Canoe Championships, the member of the 1985 Canoe Association of Canada Quadrennial Planning Committee, Editorial Review Board for Paddles Up, the Canadian Canoe Association's official publication, executive member of the Society for Canoe Championships. He's been chair of the organizing committee of the 1993 Annual General Meeting, the Canadian Olympic Association, held in Halifax. He's co-chair of the Bid Committee, 1999 Pan American Championships in Halifax. Competition chair of the 1989 Junior World Canoe Championships, successfully held in Dartmouth. Chief official of the Olympic and National Team Trials, Canadian Canoe Association, 1991 to present. Chair of the Nova Scotia High Performance Committee, Chair of the National Coaches Advisory Council, Chair of the National Coaches Association. He's been on the mission staff in 1991 Canada Winter Games. He was co-founder, vice president of Nova Scotia Canoe Coaches Association. We do owe him. We certainly do. Like Bobby Douglas, he's been honored a few times before tonight. He's received the Education Quality Award from the Nova Scotia Teachers Union, Contributions to Youth Award from Knights of Columbus and Windsor Junction, Award for Service to Amateur Sport from Sport Nova Scotia. He's received the Edgar Gilbert Award for Coaching Excellence, Canadian Canoe Association, Coaching Excellence Award from the Coaches Association of Canada, the Knight of Champions Award. He was named the honorary head coach 1985 Nova Scotia Special Olympics team, and he's been named Nova Scotia Coach of the Year. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to present to you the fifth inductee tonight, a coach who's had the uncanny ability to make all kids, no matter where they are in the pecking order, feel like they're the most important kids on the lake. An Olympic coach extraordinaire, the maker of many, many men and women out of many, many boys and girls, the father of the now 25-year-old Chima family, Mr. Frank Garner.
To make the presentation, Mrs. Carol Miller. Frank, is Chima really 25 years old?
We just celebrated the 25th anniversary about 3 weekends ago, and we're all still recovering from it. We had a great party, and it was really nice because they actually, we won, as Sandy said, in 1977, but the club this year, and I can't take any credit for it. They've got a new coach, but they won the Canadian Championship this year in its 25th year.
The sport has made incredible inroads over that period of time here.
Oh, there's no doubt about it, and I think it's the commitment of a lot of volunteers. We've got a lot of coaches, most of which are volunteers, but there's a real commitment on the parts of the canoe clubs in this area and in Nova Scotia, and there's no doubt I think it's one of the premier sports in the province now.
Well, you have to assume that '84 personally would have to be one of the highlights for Frank Garner.
Not really, Pat. It's interesting. '84 was important, but I have to be honest with you. In 1977, when we won the Canadian Championship, because it was a team effort, and there were so many people, kids, parents, you know, there were so many people involved. That really was the most pleasure I've gotten out of the sport.
Where do we go from here?
In canoeing, Pat, I'll tell you, we've got some young people now. They just came back from the Mexico World Championships, but in Atlanta, I believe canoeing will be looking at a number of medals. So they're still doing very well.
And for you, it must be a delight to be inducted into the hall tonight along with Ann Dodge.
Well, when you phoned me, Pat, and told me I was going in with, as Sandy has said, probably the most dedicated and focused athlete I've ever worked with, and a real sweetheart. If I can say that these days, can you say that?
Ann will accept that, I think, in the good grace in which it's offered.
Pat, can I say one thing about the football team here? You guys don't remember, but I did.
You played against them.
Oh, yeah. Both ways I had to play against you guys, and Jim Shea and Paul Brulé. I think there's a cleat right about there. But I had to play two ways, and I remember being up 15-0 at halftime, and that idiot Purnell run down the sidelines. I said, I knew Loney was going to use that against us.
Thanks, Frank. Frank Garner, ladies and gentlemen.